I chose a particular topic, specific topic for my paper, and I'll try to analyze what's the situation of Muslim in Europe, and above all, what's meaning to be a Muslim in a European country. This is, I think, this is a lot of disinformation about Islam, and I think that Islam often seen like a danger for our society. But I think that this is at the end a resource, an important resource, an economic resource and a social resource. But many politicians speak about immigration, speak about Islam like a public enemy. When we listen from television, when we read on newspaper that about Al-Qaeda, about the war in Iraq. So we understand that Islam is like a public enemy. But for example, in a country like Italy, this is an economic resource, very important economic resource, and for example for industry, and because there are many jobs that Italy don't want to carry out, and so I think that it's important for politicians, for the heads of all the nation of all around the world. It's important to make a global plan of integration in a European politic of immigration, and because I think it's important to avoid a future religious crash, because I think that it's possible in the next future, because there are, for example, in Italy, a lot of contradiction, a lot of disinformation about people, about politicians.
The genetic engineering is used to modify both animals and plants' DNA, and the uses of GMO are different. For example, they are used in agriculture to improve productivity or to reduce costs. But up to now, the scientific knowledge about GMO is not developed enough. So we don't know exactly which are the consequences of the consumption of GMO or of the spreading of GMO in the environment. There's a debate about GMO effects. In fact, there are some people who support them and state that they are useful and safe. But on the other hand, many scientists prove that GMO can provoke some important risk to human health and environment, such as the risk of allergenicity or resistance, antibiotic resistance, or even a genetic pollution. The state's position towards GMO are different. For example, the United States, that are among the main producers of GMO, in the United States there is no labeling procedures. There are no labeling procedures. GMO are considered to be equivalent to conventional organisms. So there is no control on GMO, on products containing GMO. The question of labels is very important because it's linked to the consumer's right to a free choice between products containing GMO and conventional ones. In the European Union, mandatory labels were introduced in 2001. The European Union legislation is considered to be the strictest in the world. But there's an exemption. The current legislation provides an exemption for that products that contain less than 0.9% of GMO. So practically the consumer rights to a free choice is violated also by the European Union legislation. Another important question is that of coexistence between genetically modified organisms and conventional ones, because there's a risk of genetic pollution. Also in this case, the European Union moved the first step with our research program, the CoExtra program, that aims to find a way to avoid genetic contamination, but also new rules to protect farmers from the contamination cost, the crops contamination cost. Finally, an international agreement was signed in 2003. I refer to the Biosafety Protocol that regulates the GMO trade. But it wasn't signed by the main producers of GMO, among these the United States, Canada and Argentina. I believe that there is evidence of the fact that GMO are not safe, and they should not be produced and not marketed at all. But I know that it's quite impossible. So I hope that at least all states introduce mandatory labels on the products containing GMO in order to allow people to protect themselves from the risk coming from the consumption of GMO. The course that I have attended at the Triennale, I only studied the consequences, the risk, the GMO risk to the environment and the human health. But I didn't study the state's positions towards them. So in this paper I extended my my knowledge with this other aspect, the regulation of GMO, very important. Also in my paper I think that there is it's interdisciplinary, because not only for English and sociology, but also I talk about some legal questions. For example, European Union legislation, but also economic question, because there is too much interest in GMO, because there is money around GMO, especially in the United States, but also in other countries. There are many big corporations that work in the biochemical fields. I don't remember exactly the name. For example, the Monsanto, that is the leader in this field. And so it's impossible to say stop with GMO. It's not possible, but at least we can regulate this problem in order to allow people to defend themselves, to say...
How can we defend ourselves? Because example, you know, because you studied, or we don't know, many of us don't know.
Information is important, because up to now people is not able to know what they eat, for example. If I buy a product that is not labeled, I don't know if this product contains or not GMO, so I'm not able to protect myself from the risk I liked all the papers, but I think that this paper, I don't remember its name, is very important because touch a very current question. Nowadays we are frightened by terrorism, so we look at every Muslim as a terrorist. I think that it's a very big problem because not each Muslim is a bad person or a terrorist, but we are not able to do this crime between discriminate between terrorists, between integralists and Muslims that are not terrorists.